point of owning all of these books if I don't plan to ever go back and reread any of them? So last year, I actually made a video just like this of all the books that I wanted to reread over the past year, because the year before that, I didn't really ever do any rereads. Like maybe I picked up like 1 or 2 books that I ended up revisiting, but I really wanted to make it a goal for last year to reread a lot of my books, because what's the point of owning them if I'm not going to reread them? And I actually did way better than I expected. I think I put like, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 books into that video, just like give myself a little bit of a goal, a little bit of something to look back to be like, oh, am I in the mood of rereading something? Let's go back to that video. And I actually ended up rereading like, I think it was 72 books or so. I did make a video like last month of all of the books that like, I did end up rereading. So if you wanted to watch it, I'll have a link down below for you. But either way, I was so proud of myself with all the books that I actually went and revisited last year. Even if like the second time around, they weren't as good, even though the majority of them were as good, I still was really happy that I actually went back to the books that I physically owned. So with that said, I'm going to share with you a bunch of books that I want to reread this coming year. I did give myself a little bit of a hefty goal. I have a lot of books to share with you, but I do think that realistically, I can get through every single book that I have to share with you today this coming year, because you know what? We've got 12 months and I don't even know how many books I have to share with you, but I know myself and I know what I can like realistically do. And I have a feeling that if I'm going to go and reread some books this year, it's going to be the ones that I'm talking about today. So first up, I have all my Mariana Zapata books. This is a little bit obvious if you follow me for a while. I actually am almost finished rereading all of the books in my hands for a third time around. I only have Under Lock, Dear Aaron, and then From Luca with Love to do for a third time around. And then once I finish all those 3, I'm going to go for a 4th and probably 5th and maybe even a 6th round of rereading all of these books this coming year. So without a doubt, I will be revisiting all of these. These are my favorite Mariana Zapata books in the entire world. They're some of my favorite books of all time. I love them so freaking much, and I will be revisiting them in 2023. And then also very obviously ACOTAR and Throne of Glass I'm going to be revisiting this year. I did reread these for a 3rd and 4th time in 2022. And I'm not going to, put too much on myself this coming year. I'm sure I will read these at least once. We'll see if it happens twice. But my point is that without a doubt, I will definitely be going back to 2 of my favorite series of all time this coming year. And then I'd also really like to revisit the Clockwork series and the Last Hour series this coming year. So if you did see that video that I had done of all the books that I reread this past year, then you know that I had revisited the majority of all of the Shadowhunter books / series. Like I had reread the Mortal Instruments, and I had reread the Dark Artifices. I reread all the short stories. I reread a bunch of like the other random books there, but I left out these 2 series because the 3rd book in this series is coming out in 2023. So I didn't really want to have to do another round of rereading, especially because this is my least favorite series out of all of these Shadowhunter series in general. So I decided that I was going to leave this series behind so that I can first see this one and then go and jump and read about their children, just like, do it all back to back. It made sense to me. So this coming year, I have a feeling that I will revisit this one, then I'll revisit this one so that I can prepare myself for the new release that's coming out in this series. And then while we're on the topic of fantasy, this next series that I wanted to share with you is a little bit of a hefty goal for myself. Like, I don't know if I'm actually going to end up revisiting this series, but I do have 12 months to decide if I want to do it or not. And at the very moment, I'm feeling like it might be a lot of fun. So I would like to revisit the Mistborn series. I had an amazing time while reading this series, but it is a little bit large and it is a little bit intense, especially because I'm not so into fantasy anymore. I had read this series at the perfect time in my life when I was like a diehard, like anything fantasy, anything cool, magic system, things along those lines. And this book, it just hit the right spot at the right time. But the thing is that I don't, it's just been in my head lately. I think it's because, they're starting to make a TV show about it. Things are starting to come in the works. They're redoing like the covers of this and everything like that. So I've been seeing it around a lot. And I really did have an amazing time when I read this for the first time. So I'm thinking that if I really want to put myself out there a little bit, try to get myself back into fantasy, maybe revisit an old favorite, because I know that I loved it. And I feel like it might be a really good thing to reread, because I remember the first time that I read it, even though I had a pretty easy time, catching on to what was going on and the magic system and everything like that, I feel like it might be really fun to go and revisit it now that I already know everything that's going to happen and see what else I could pick up on. So I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but maybe we will see. And then this next one, I did reread it this past year, but I did do it basically a year ago. I'm pretty sure I read it at the beginning of January, maybe the end of January, beginning of February, somewhere around that time. So it's almost been a year, but I feel like I would really like to revisit the Raven Cycle again. I know that a lot of people either love this series or hate this series, but again, just like Mistborn, I had read this series for the first time at the perfect time in my life. I catched onto it right away, really enjoyed it at the time that I read it. And then when I went and revisited them, I had a great time because it was kind of like a comfort read at that point. I was just going and hanging out out with some of the characters that I really enjoyed the first time that I hung out with them. And then, I had a really great time revisiting it, even if it might not be the perfect story in the world. So I feel like, if I wanted a comfort read at some point this year, maybe revisit these books, because I had a great time reading it the second time around. So why wouldn't I have a great time rereading it the third time around, And the next up, I wanted to share with you a couple of books from my favorite list from 2022 video that I'd love to reread. Not all of the books that are on that list do I actually per se want to go and revisit. Who knows what's going to end up happening this coming year? But so far, I only have a couple in mind that I really would like to go back to. So first of all, if you did miss that video, I'll have a link down below for you, because in that video is where I actually talk about all of the synopsises for all of these books and why I love them and everything like that. So not going to go into that here. But either way, from that video, I would really like to read Waking Olivia. So this one was pretty obvious, because even in that video, I'm like, I've been wanting to reread this book for a while and I just haven't gotten around to it. So this year I'm making it a mission to get back to this book, because I loved it so much and I'd really, really like to revisit it. So that's that. And then also, I think I really want to revisit Terms and Conditions. So this kind of feels a little bit more random to me. I'm not really itching to go and revisit this story specifically, but I did have a really good time when I read it for the first time. And I do think that I would enjoy it a lot the second time around. And I think that I really want to reread this one specifically, because I do know that the third book in the series is coming out sometime at the beginning of this year. I haven't really been keeping up with it too much, because I do know that it's a second chance romance, and I'm not a huge fan of second chance romances, so I haven't just been generally excited for its release. But I do know that the second it comes out, I'm gonna start seeing all of these really good reviews, and it's gonna be like, oh my god, this is such a good time, and I'm just gonna feel FOMO. So I know that even though I don't like the general trope of what the book's gonna be about, I still might really enjoy it, because sometimes things can surprise you. So I feel like if I went and revisited this book, which I absolutely loved, maybe it will get me a little bit more excited for the new release, and then maybe I'll go into it with a little bit more of an open mind, and maybe I'll still really enjoy it, even though I'm not a huge fan of second chance romances. So that's kind of my reasoning for wanting to go and revisit this one this coming year. And then the last book that I'm feeling the urge to do a reread of this coming year from my favorite list of 2022 videos specifically is the Mindfuck series by S.C. Abby. So I absolutely love this the first time that I read it, and I'm coming up to my year point of when I had read it for the first time. So I feel like over the next couple of months, I might get into this mood again of reading about serial killers and romance and Criminal Mind vibes in general. And I feel like when that mood hits, I should really remember oh, go back to this book specifically instead of trying to find something new, because I feel like this would be something really fun to revisit. I had such a good time when I read it the first time, and I feel like it's just that type of book that would be solid the second time around as well. And then in case you missed it, I did also make a almost favorite reads from 2022 video. So from that video specifically, which I'll have linked down below in case you missed it and you want to check it out, I do think that I want to revisit Focus by Carl Sorensen. So I had actually reread Forbidden by Carl Sorensen, which made it into my favorite reads from 2022 video. And then when I was talking about this book specifically, in that other video that I had made, I started to remember how good this book actually was. And I'm feeling the next time that I just need a good pick me up. I'm feeling a reading slump's coming on, and I just need something quick and easy. This should be the book that I turn to, because I have a feeling that it would really be able to help me when I'm in that type of mood. And now for some very random books that I'd like to revisit this year. So this first one actually is the most random out of every single book that's on this list. But first up, I have 1% of You by Michelle Gross. So in case you're not familiar with this story, because I don't talk about it often, I probably maybe only mentioned it on my channel a couple of times around the time when I actually read it. This book is about a single mom. She's actually a single mom, and she's pregnant, and she ends up moving to this new apartment building. And then there's this guy that lives across the street that ends up kind of becoming friends with her, and he's kind of very grumpy of sorts, but it's going to end up being a grumpy sunshine situation with a single mom sort of thing. And it's a very cute story. The thing is that the first time that I read this book, I didn't absolutely love it. I don't even remember what I had rated it at the time, but I remember that for a while there, I was really into the story. And then as we got a little bit closer to the end of the book, I started my enjoyment started teetering a little bit, because it was very Guy Fawkes First, Guy Fawkes Horror situation. And he just started boring me a little bit because of how much he was into her, and how much he wanted to be with her and everything like that. And for some reason, I just didn't enjoy it in the moment. But I have a weird feeling that maybe the second time around, if I picked it up when I was in a little bit of a different mood, I might enjoy it more. I feel I was in a very critical moment when I read it for the first time. And I could be wrong about this. It could be very meh the second time around as well, but it's something that I think I want to revisit and see if maybe if I picked it up at the perfect time, I might enjoy it a little bit more than I did the first time around, because I remember it had a really solid start, and maybe it was just me that didn't really enjoy the ending at the time that I read it for the first time, And then next up, I think I really want to revisit Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. So this is the 5th book, I believe, in her Brutal Birthright series. And by far, it was my favorite out of all 6 books in the series. This one is like, it's a mafia romance, but you're following a girl that is part of the mafia and someone's trying to kill her. So she ends up getting a bodyguard that's going to like have to protect her. And then he's going to end up taking her away to like a small town to like stay on a ranch because they have to hide away for a little bit. So it's got like a small town vibe, but it also has a mafia vibe, and it also has like, you know, a bodyguard situation, and it has a reverse Grumpy Sunshine situation. And I just remember like really, really loving this book at the time that I read it. And it has been a minute since not only have I read this book, but also since I've read a mafia book. So I feel like if I'm going to like, you know, want to revisit anything like in the era of like dark romances of sorts, this would be the book that I'd want to revisit. So I'm putting it on this list because I have a feeling that at some point throughout the next 12 months, I will be in enough of a mood to want to reread this book. And therefore I'm reminding myself right now to go back to it when that mood hits. And then next up, I wanted to talk about Not Pretending Anymore by V. Keelan and Penelope Ward. So I cannot remember why I recently talked about this book. I have a feeling it was maybe in like, did I like my favorite reads from last year sort of video? Like I had made a video in December of all the books that I had put on my favorite list from 2021 to see if I still feel the same way about it. And now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm pretty sure this was why I was talking about this book, because I guess this book made it onto my favorite list of 2021. And it's a book that I do think I would very much like to revisit because I do think it would be good just as much the second time around. So this is a fake dating story. You're following this girl and this boy who ends up becoming roommates, and then they're going to end up fake dating because they both have crushes on somebody else and they're going to want to get those other people jealous. So they're going to fake date each other to like make that happen. And then obviously they're going to end up falling for each other instead. So I remember at the time that I read this, I had a really, really good time with it. And then this past year, I actually did revisit a couple of other books by V. Keelan and Penelope Ward, and they were just as good the second time around. So I do feel like this book would live up to my memory of it if I did decide to revisit it. So I feel like at some point in this year, if I'm just down for like a good pick-me-up book, I should really go back to this book because I feel like it would be a solid time the second time around. And then the last 2 books that I wanted to share with you is The Risk by Elle Kennedy, which is the 2nd book, I believe, in her Briar You series, and then also Scandalous by L.J. Shen. So why I'm putting these 2 books together is because these 2 books were actually on this video from last year. Like I had said last year in this video that I wanted to reread both of these books, and I did not end up getting to them, but they are 2 books that I really would love to reread, and then for some reason, I just didn't end up getting around to them this past year. So I'm putting them on this video's list because I really do think that I should revisit these at some time because first of all, this is the 3rd book in the Center of Saints series, and I'm a huge fan of the series in general. I read Vicious 3 times, twice last year, and I had a really good time doing that. And this was like my 2nd favorite book from the series in general. It's kind of like an age gap, workplace environment, forbidden a little bit sort of situation. It's got a lot of good stuff going on for it. It also has like a single dad sort of trope. So I feel like all around the board, I would absolutely love revisiting this story. And I just didn't do it this past year, and I'm a little bit upset that I didn't do it. So putting it on this year's list so that hopefully I do eventually get around to it. And then also The Risk. This is one of my favorite books from the off-campus Briar You series in general. And why I didn't get around to this one is because instead I actually went and reread The Deal and then The Chase by Elle Kennedy because I had gotten those on audio, so I just decided to like revisit them. And then for some reason I just didn't end up picking this one up last year, but I feel like I really should have because this is one of my favorite books from the entire universe. So I really would like to eventually get back to this book as well. So hopefully in the next 12 months, I will reread this one and then reread this one, as well as all the books that I talked about in today's video. So that is kind of everything that I wanted to share with you. So I am so curious to know if you are a reread type of person or not. I know that it's a very 50-50 thing. Like some people do not like revisiting books, and then other people will just like reread books over and over again, just like I can. So I'd love to know what books you like to reread, or if you're just not a fan of rereading in general. But either way, if you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to my channel if you're not currently subscribed, because I would really appreciate it. But either way, I really appreciate you watching my video in general. So thank you for that. And anyway, until next time, enjoy reading.